Clarissa here. We are back in the limelight with yet another extraordinary author and some really important messages that I think we all need to hear, especially in these really interesting times. May I put it that way? Some people are finding themselves in difficulty. And I know that because, I also wrote a book on personal development, and I'm doing a lot of, I've got a lot of ear to the ground, and I'm talking a lot to other podcast hosts that we all kind of know people are in difficulty. So I like to bring people on that are going to be able to give us some hope, some guidance, some solace, and some really interesting information and messages that can help us through some pretty challenging times. I really have been waiting for a long time to speak to our next guest, and I know that we've been trying to get him on for a while. But he's a doctor. His name is Dr. Andy Hahn, and he's going to teach us how to break free from anxiety, depression, trauma, and potentially chronic pain by learning the right tools in just a single hour of self-healing. He says that we can replace months of therapy, and I'm really excited to hear more about that. So your mind and body can become together. They can heal physically, emotionally, mentally, and also there are some spiritual ailments that I want to hear about as well. So without further ado, let me bring on Dr. Andrew Hahn. There he is. Good afternoon to you. I know that you're on the East Coast. I'm over here on the West. And I think we're both afternoon. Yes, we are. Good to see you, Dr. Hahn. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Clarissa. And I'm hoping I can really be of some service to your audience.
I think you will. In fact, I know you will. I've spoken to you before. I know we've spoken in the past, but I've never had you on the show. I'm very excited about that. You are the author of the 1 Hour Miracle. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to hear what kind of information, what kind of message you can give to the people. We know you've got your ear to the ground. I'm in personal development, and we know people are suffering right now. Again, anxiety, depression. We hear a lot about thoughts of suicide and people that are committing suicide, from our youth mental health crisis to our veterans to now the new group that has joined the ranks, unfortunately, are men in general, are having a really hard time navigating this thing that we call life these days. So I'm going to give you the floor, Dr. Hahn, and have you give us some of your knowledge.
All right, let's start with something simple, which is that trauma is enormous right now. It's like the whole world is traumatized.
Right.
So I think there's only one reason people come to therapy, which is what you call trauma. I think that's it. And I think suffering and trauma are the same thing. And I want to give you a simple definition of trauma, which is, I think, unbelievably user-friendly. Trauma is simply something that you can't take in stride. If you could take everything in stride, no matter what happened to you, you could just say, I may not like it, but I'm not going to be reactive. I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm not going to have some terrible symptoms that I'm really, anxious about. So that's the first thing, that people come for healing because there's something that can't be taken in stride. That's the whole deal.
Yeah.
So what is healing is mastering what can't be taken in stride. That's it. If you can master it, then you're free, because anyone could do anything to you, or anything could happen to you, and you could still take it in stride. And if you could do that, that's like the North Star of what we're trying to get to.
Yep.
And I think it's very simple to say how to do that, which is putting together something called mindfulness and something called body-centered therapy or somatic therapy. I'll tell you what I mean.
Right.
We had talked, I'll start where you had talked, because it's the first thing I think you brought up, which is veterans or soldiers. So let's start there.
Okay.
Let's suppose, I'll give you a simple example. A veteran's in my office, a motorcycle backfires, and the veteran has a panic attack, right?
Right.
Well, it's not likely he's having a panic attack because the motorcycle backfired. But let's suppose 20 years ago he's in Afghanistan, all right? And that's why he's stuck there. Now, let me tell you what I think is the key. Whenever there's something that can't be handled, in that moment, discomfort is born. So the discomfort and the thing that can't be handled are the same thing. And every symptom you have, while it's terrible from your point of view, you're having a panic attack, is the best clue you could have to the thing that wasn't handled. All right. Now, here's the key. When I said, you can't, you have this trauma, a sensation is born. So you're having your panic attack, and I say to the soldier, I say, well, or this person who's no longer a soldier, he may have even forgot what happened. I say, when you're having your panic attack, what happens in the body? And he said, my heart's pounding fast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say something very funny to him. I'm going to say, sir, you're not having a panic attack. Your little toe is just fine. But someone whose name is heart pounding fast is having a panic attack. And you are unconsciously living out his story. That's the deal. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose to become heart pounding fast in the same way an actor would choose to become a role.
Right.
All right. And the second you do that, you're going to then say, I'm going to share heart pounding fast story. But you're no longer unconsciously identified with it. You're identified with the one who's choosing to be it and then experiencing it. So you're now identified with the one who's bearing witness and saying, I'm going to be with you, and I'm not you. All right. And then whatever story you tell, so you might say, oh my God, bombs are going off and I'm going to die, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Except it won't be you in my office telling that story anymore. It'll be heart pounding fast. And when you get done, if all you needed to do was share the story, because sometimes you need something more, like some kind of intervention or practice.
Right.
But say I find out the only thing you need to do is share that story. Now, what happens is that which was split off and dismembered, sort of a life of its own called heart pounding fast, gets remembered, and suddenly heart pounding fast isn't there anymore. It's gone back into a flow. It's no longer there. And if the only reason you're having panic attacks is because of that one story, I will give you a pretty ironclad guarantee that the next time that motorcycle backfires, you'll say, I remember what happened. And I remember I'm the one who experienced all of those feelings of anxiety, but I'm no longer unconsciously living out that person's story.
Mm-hmm.
And in a simple way, that's all you need to do in order to heal. That's the thing.
So you're suggesting also when we come to you, you will talk us through it. You'll work through that moment with us. Is it after we leave you, and potentially it can happen again? Can we manage that ourselves then? Is that something we can start to talk ourselves through the next time potentially it happens?
I'll give you a story. Our editor had never done anything with us, and she had a problem. And her problem was that every time she went to do work, she's a writer, every time she went to do work, either as an editor or as a ghostwriter, she could do it. But every time she tried to, she had a book that was going to come out, which was a creative book, and she had total writer's block. She couldn't write any of it. It was just like a nightmare for her. So she took what we just said and she said, all right, I'm going to drop into writer's block and see what happens in my body. She had never done a session with us. And suddenly when she focused on writer's block, she started to get a headache. And then she got an excruciating headache. And she brought all her attention to headache. And here's what happened. She said, oh my gosh. She could see it like a picture. She was very visual. She said, I'm in first grade and I'm writing and I'm creative and I'm having the best time in the world. And I can see myself and I have my pigtails and I'm writing along and I'm so excited and I can't even see what I'm writing, but I'm like in the flow of it. And I'm like over the top happy. And it's like, and I'm feeling like this is my whole, like, I'm loving it. I'm passionate. And suddenly, wham, she gets hit on the head with 2 math books by her teacher, who says, I told you it's time to put that away and do your work.
Okay.
Now, she had forgotten all of that. And then the next thing she says to herself is, work always has to come first, and creativity, it's dangerous to be creative.
Right. Understood. Yeah.
Okay. And then she says, this happened, 40 some years ago. She said, okay, so I made a choice to protect myself from violence by saying I can't be creative, right? And then she said, I'm not going to I won't say what she called that teacher because I don't know how much you can swear on this show. I'm not going to let that woman win. And she said, little protector in my head, who's the one who was saying, you can't be creative. She wasn't saying this was about violence, that being hit on the head. She was saying that that was the choice she made to cope by protecting herself, by making sure she was never creative again, because creativity equals being hit violently, right? So she's little protector in my head. Thank you very much. You probably kept me alive when I was a little kid, but I don't need you anymore. And the second she said that, and she said, I'm grateful to you, but I don't need you anymore, she just experienced it leaving her head. And she said, a year later, she said, I've never had writer's block about my creativity again.
So we talked about the anxiety and the trauma, if you will. Can you speak to us about depression, which is kind of a whole nother animal, but a part of the overarching? How do we, when we're feeling depressed, when we're feeling kind of down, and I might have experienced it in my life, and I know when the slope starts to get slippery, and it's kind of one of those things where you must. In my experience anyway, is you have to find a way out quick, and a lot of it is self-talk, quite frankly, in my experience. What say you about that?
I'll give you a story. I'm not going to say that every major depression goes away in a session. That would be crazy, because there can be many layers to it, and sometimes it's about things that are really in your life. But I'm going to give you a story about a college student who had a major depression. Okay. And he came in. He got depressed around Christmas time. This was the end of February. And the year before, he got depressed around the same time, and he was in a fairly major depression for about 4 months. Okay, so this had been about 2 months, and his family was sure that it was a biological depression. But before they put him on meds, they said, "Will you see him?" So I said, "Sure." And I found out also his depression, which is not always the case. There was only one story about it, and it was also a protection, which he thought was crazy. A major depression was a protection. But I said, yes. So here's what you're going to do. It's the same idea. What I said to him, and I found out that it was a story I could tell you if you care about this, but I can kind of determine sometimes, like, when, because you want to go to where it originates, because everything after that's an echo. Like with the guy who has the motorcycle backfiring, you're not going to get as much if you don't know where it crystallized, where the root cause is. So I can find out where the root cause is. And I found out that it was in this lifetime, somewhere between the ages 0 and 5. And I found out that his depression wasn't the problem, but it was a protection, just like in the case of our editor, whose name is Megan. His name is Nate. He lets me use his name. So I said, Nate, when you're feeling depression, he said, and here's how he described his depression. He said, I just don't care about anything.
I
take no joy in anything. I'm creative, but I don't want to make anything. And I have what's called anhedonia, which just means like I'm flat. Okay. Okay. So I say, when you feel that depression, what do you feel in the body? And he says, oh God, it feels like heavy, wet oatmeal. So I'm going to say to him again, it's not you that's depressed, it's heavy, wet oatmeal. And we also know that heavy, wet oatmeal is Nate somewhere between birth and age 5. Okay. So I drop him I say, you're just going to become heavy, wet oatmeal. And then a story comes to him. And it's really quite a story. He said, I'm about 3 years old, and I made a special gift for my father. And I'm giving my father the gift, but I know something about what happened with his father. His father pushed him away, and he's going up the stairs trying to give his father the gift. And his father sort of leaves him, pushes him one more time, leaves him at the door, and drives off in his car. Okay. And Nate didn't remember the story. And he says to himself, I don't care. And the reason he says, I don't care, is it was just too painful. I don't care is a precursor to depression, because depression is not feeling. So I said, all right, here's the deal. We now know not all depression. Sometimes depression is the reliving of the trauma itself. I could tell you a story about that too. But in this case, it was a protection. So I said, all right, here's the situation. Little Nate made a choice called I don't care, whose other name is heavy, wet oatmeal. So you don't need it anymore, because that happened when you were 3 and now you're 21. So you can just choose, you can thank it, and you can choose to bring it outside of you just using your consciousness, which he thought was a weird idea, but he could do it. And when you choose to bring heavyweight oatmeal, who that is 3-year-old Nate, who couldn't handle what was going on with his father and all of the pain of that and the protection he made. So he made that choice out of fear. So all you're going to do is send that energy, which he could see outside of him, the heavyweight oatmeal, you're just going to send it love.
Yeah.
And he channels love into it. And he says, that's great. And I say, you ought to feel more spacious now. And he said, I do feel more spacious. And I said, go into the spaciousness and find the you were before that happened. And he goes in and he says, I see this little golden hair boy and he's dancing around and he's making things and he's really feeling joy. And I said, why don't you put your hand on your body where he's been hiding, or he was hiding and then hidden, but now he's been revealed, and just invite him to come out and touch your hand and expand forward and back and left and right and up and down until he fills you up. And he gets to keep his childlike wonder, but he also gets to have all of the wisdom and experience you've had over the last 18 years. Okay. Yeah. And then he says, I feel great. Then he says, so why did I get depressed? I said, I don't know. Why don't you recreate heavyweight oatmeal? We'll ask it. So he recreates heavyweight oatmeal and he says, oh, I know exactly what happened. He said, these depressions had no cause. Everyone said there's no precipitant. Okay, it just out of the blue. He said, I know exactly what happened. I was the head of an improv troupe, and I went to my father and said, Dad, I want you to come to my opening. And he said, Nate, I'm sorry I can't come, but I have a new wife and I have toddlers and we've agreed not to go anyplace. And he says, oh, that's no problem, Dad. I don't care. He had forgotten all of that. Next day starts to go into a major depression.
Yeah.
Okay. So then he says, well, how about the year before that? My father went to my opening of my play. So what about that one? I said, I don't know. Create heavyweight oatmeal again. Right? He creates it. He says, oh, I know exactly what happened. I was making a special gift for my girlfriend, and I gave her the gift, and all of this was subliminal. He gave her the gift, and he said, suddenly, I'm realizing she's giving me a fake smile, and she's not really receiving my gift. And without my awareness, I'm saying, I don't care. And the next day, he started to go into a depression. So, and then he said, I feel great. I'm feeling hungry. His mother was outside. He said, I feel wonderful. And his depression went away in 1 hour. Now, I'm not going to tell you that always happens. I had someone who wanted a blood draw. It took a year. But you don't know how many layers of stories there were in a blood draw.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Well, every story is individual, right?
Every story is individual. So that's one about depression. And I know this is a funny thing to say, but I think everything is, in a sense, exemplars of things that can't be handled. Sometimes the body can't handle something, but usually it's us. And if we could find out what the real problem is and where it originated and find the sensation, if I would say one thing to your audience, whenever there's something you're reactive to, or you have judgment about, or you're feeling anxious about, find the sensation, choose to become it, and just ask it what it's come to share about whatever your problem is. And I'd say every sensation, believe it or not, is like a book. It's like a living being, like it's part of a community waiting for you to give it its attention instead of saying, I hate you and I'm going to take a pill. So that's what I can say.
So are you using meditation? Are you using hypnotherapy? Are you using a sort of a type of regression? What are all of the above or none of the above?
I do all of those things, but it's none of the above, because look at this. The meditation, I invite people to just, shift and center and take a few deep breaths and bring their attention down and in, and then just sort of open to life and open to their heart and just be receptive to whatever's there. So I do that much, right? I start talking to people and they just go into trance, but there's no hypnosis here, because what I'm inviting you, and there's no regression, right? Because what I'm saying is, most somatic therapists regress you. They'd say, I have to take you back to age 3. Yeah. I'd say, no, the 3-year-old is here and his name is heavyweight oatmeal. So I'm not regressing you. It's all here right now. Okay. Yeah. And because it's all here right now, the only resource you need is if you have any witness function whatsoever, you say, I'm bearing witness to you and I'm not you. So I don't have to regress anybody. I don't have to do hypnosis. They just focus on the sensation, and everybody can do it. I haven't met one person who can't. They say, what happens if you say, I can't feel anything? I say, that's a feeling. I ask them, where in your body do you feel? I can't feel anything. And they say, oh, I feel it in my head. I say, well, great. Bring it all your attention to I feel it.
It can be a little scary though. I mean, I can feel it could be a little scary, and you need a little courage, I think, to go some certain places. You do. I did. I mean, I knew, for me, it was a little scary. I needed some courage. I wasn't sure. And it was it was difficult for me. I'm not going to lie.
It's difficult for everybody because you think it's you. What I'm going to say to you is, if you could find, I've worked with people who had ritual abuse. I've worked with the most horrific things ever. And if they can find the sensation, they're not going there. They're bringing all their attention to this sensation and saying, sensation, you share your story with me.
Right.
And
cool. Yeah.
So the key is, you're not here. I'm not asking you to report anything from you. I'm not asking Clarissa to say anything. I'm asking sick stomach or tight throat or I can't breathe or pain in right foot that's chronic pain.
Yeah.
So
let's go there a second. I got you. Let's go there a second because we talked about anxiety, depression, and trauma. But in all of this, you also do work with chronic pain. So and not only when I read allergies, I was like, wow, that's interesting. So I get the chronic pain, how that could be, tied into the work that you do, but allergies and autoimmune diseases, I was, wow, how does that all tie in?
All right, let me tell you simply. What is the story of an allergy, right? Let's think about it for a second. If it's a narrative, you think the world is kind of a dangerous place and you can't distinguish who's your friend and who's your foe. So you have to protect yourself from everything. Now we're in a narrative. I walked into my eye doctor's office and she said to me, I told her a little about my work. She said, does this work for allergies? I said, uh-huh. I said, she said, I'm going to go and mow my lawn and I have such terrible allergies. I'm going to be laid up for days, but I have to mow the lawn. I said, all right. So I said, think about what an allergy is. And she said, well, it's something like, it shouldn't affect me so much, but it does. And like, I don't know why it's affecting me, but it's really affecting me. And it's like, there's something dangerous out there. I said, all right, why don't you just drop into something that should be innocuous is dangerous. And you don't know when it's going to affect you and when it's not going to affect you. And she said she got a sensation. She started to have allergy symptoms. And she said, I said, become the allergy symptom. She said, I know exactly what this is. And she didn't tell me, but I have a little sense of what it was. And she found what it was. And it was not a story about pollen. Okay, it was a story clearly that came from her early childhood about someone who was supposed to not be dangerous, who was very dangerous to her.
Right.
And when she took care of that, her allergy went away.
Okay.
I didn't know what the story was.
That's
I came back 2 weeks later. She said, I'm telling everybody about this because like I don't have allergies now. Now, I'm not saying all allergies are that either, but you say, how could this happen? It was one story and for her it worked. So
you talk about burnout and how to make it a thing of the past. That's an interesting one because I feel tired and stressed and burnt out a good amount of the time.
Well, there's a lot to say about that too, which is if you're feeling burnout, then the question would be, the simplest answer I would give, because there's a lot of answers to that, but would be, what happens in the body when you're feeling burnout? Except this time I might want to let it just share. So let's say I'm feeling burnout. I'm feeling like my head feels heavy. All right. I'd say bring all your attention to heavy head. And we'll just say, heavy head, what have you come to share about burnout? And it will say something. It will say, you're too over responsible and like you're not. Yes. And then you'd say, all right, well, so my work is to say, how could I really care for myself as opposed to doing that? Because you've just told me why I'm burnt out. And you may even have ideas about what has to happen for me not to be burned out if you really tune into it and say, what do you need? Like you're talking to a person and they'll tell you. And if they don't know, something might come to you and you say, oh my gosh, I have to like make my schedule entirely different because I want to set aside time for myself and whatever. So,
right.
And
I'm sure this has been, you must have had some really great, help people make some really great breakthroughs throughout your lifetime of work. And that has to be a really satisfactory place to be.
It's unbelievably sad.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
Well, it's just, the thing is, why I want to get to your audience is, like, there are people who are suffering. They have problems and they don't know what to do. And what I'd say is, if you just did this one simple thing of finding the sensation that's associated with the thing that you're suffering about, and just say, okay, you're the one who's suffering sick to stomach or chronic back pain. What have you come to share with me? Where are you beginning? What's happening? Worlds open up. So that's my simple message. Then it's a lot of jazz riffs.
Absolutely. Well, I want to remind everybody we're speaking to Dr. Andy Hahn. He is a licensed clinical psychologist and the author of The 1 Hour Miracle. We haven't seen the book yet. I want to see the book. I know it's there somewhere.
It's here somewhere. Here is
the 1 Hour Miracle. Everybody, can you tell everybody where we can find your book, Dr.
You can certainly. It says a 5-step process to guide your self-healing, change the story, reauthor your life. So this is really about healing trauma, and you can clearly get the book on Amazon, and you can get it in a lot of your bookstores, and that's, like, what can you say? Amazon is where you can always get books.
And can people find you on social as well?
No, excuse me?
Can people find you on social as well?
They can. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find Instagram. They can find me on Facebook. They can find me all over the place. So
we talked about how satisfactory, your life's work has to be. I can only imagine. So I'll end this encounter with the question that I love to ask of highly successful people. And that is, in your lifetime, and it could be any part of your life, what was your crowning moment?
The most important moment of my life, actually, I'll tell you quickly. I was visiting a friend, and she had fallen the day before I got there, and she had hurt her ankle. This was before I was even doing this work, but it brought me into this work. And I didn't think this is what would come up, but this is what's here, because I think it changed my life. So she fell down, but she had gone on spiritual retreat. She was actually the head of all NGOs at the UN, and she left it to go on spiritual retreat. And she took me to the place called the Self-Realization Fellowship, and we were walking around the fellowship. And we got to these 2 benches, and she said, "You're going to have to carry me out of here. The pain is so great." And it was swollen and discolored and everything. So I helped her to sit on one edge of the bench, and then I kind of had to circumambulate the whole thing so I could get her so she could elevate her foot. And the second I sat down, I was flooded with light. And I knew it wasn't the sun because I could see where the sun was. And it was right above this light was right above my head. And I could feel it, and I could feel it coming through me. And I said to Roshan, she lets me use her name too, obviously, "I'm not going to touch your ankle, but I'm just going to bring this light through my hands to your ankle." And I didn't even say that to her, actually. And so I'm doing this for a few seconds. She said, "I can read auras, don't you?" And I said, "Roshan, I'm a nice Jewish boy from Boston. What do I know from auras?" And she said, "Are you aware that there's pure light coming through the crown of your head into the center of your chest and out your hands to my ankle?" And I said, "I can't see it the way you're talking about, but I know that it's true." And she said, "You sat in this funny place called the seat of the healer, and very few people sit there." And then we looked down, and there was no discoloration. There was no swelling. She got up. There was no pain. And I realized, in a moment, you could say on one level, that's all the healing work is, which is to align with something that's traumatized and then just bring it to a higher vibration. So I wouldn't say it was an achievement of mine. Right.
It was an achievement divine.
It was an achievement divine, which is how I look at most of the stuff. I think most of it is we just all have gifts, and like I happen to get lucky and have that gift. But it's so
I would say that's definitely true. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate your time. Everybody, we've been talking to Dr. Andrew Hahn. He is the author of The 1 Hour Miracle. Go get the book. He's told you how to do that. Dr. Hahn, thank you again for your time.
And if you do read the book, please, I don't, I know about algorithms now, and you really do like it, which most people do. If you
leave a review, it helps.
because we want everyone to read it. So thank you.
Everybody, leave a review, everybody. Dr. Hahn, stay right there while I say goodbye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the In the Limelight podcast, intelligent media for the savvy entrepreneur. You can listen to this and all of my podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, and Inspired News Radio. You'll find all of my videos and the In the Limelight digital magazine on ClarissaBurt.com. And don't forget to connect with me on social pretty much anywhere. Stay well until we meet again. In the Limelight.